Hello, and thank you all for attending this session. This is session number 20, entitled How to Win Friends and Influence People Through Contingent Workforce Optimization. Hopefully you're in the right place, and we're looking forward to hearing from two amazing speakers. My name is Ali Music. I am the Senior Director of Member Services here at SIG. I'm going to quickly introduce the two gentlemen, and then we're going to jump right into content. If you have any questions at all, please drop them into the chat box and we will do our best to answer them at the conclusion of the session. And if for some reason we run out of time because there's just so many questions, they'll circle back with you post-event. So the first speaker I'm going to introduce is goes by JF. He is the Executive Vice President of Randstad SourceRight, where he oversees Canadian operations and works to help organizations restructure, develop, and expand their talent procurement practice. He specializes in total talent management and integrated talent solutions. The second gentleman we have here is Bernard. He is the Interim Vice President, Global Strategic Sourcing and Real Estate Services at CAE. He is the he is the Global Strategic Sourcing Executive with over 20 years experience in direct and indirect procurement, including leadership in aerospace, manufacturing, and distribution industries in both Europe and North America. So thank you both so much for being here today, and I will pass the baton to you guys. Take it away.
Thanks, Ali.
Thank you, Ali. I will. Perfect. So today, thank you everybody for being here today, and I've got the pleasure to be with Bernard Ross from CAE. And for those of you, many of you may have heard of CAE, and some of you may have seen them lately in the news because they've made many acquisitions in different countries in the last few months. So make sure that you go on their website and check them out. Today, what we have on the agenda is that we're going to be speaking about some of the benefits and drivers as it relates to staff augmentation and service procurement management. How to build a business case, and also what's the decision-making process when it comes to what you want to do with your contingent workforce. Also, very important, who are the stakeholders within your organizations as well as surrounding organizations, and how can you gain their support with your initiatives? And lastly, how to build a strong foundation for the future and expansion as well. So making sure you don't build just for today, but how do you build for the future? So, Bernard, if we turn it to the drivers, and just coming back to a little bit of context about how long have you had a managed service program in place at CAE, and what's been your experience so far with MSP in general, but also with contingent workforce in general?
So thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the introduction and the introduction for CAE. As you mentioned, maybe just a quick high-level overview of CAE Inc. We're headquartered in Montreal. We have about 10,000 employees globally, 160 centers in 35 countries. So we have quite a diverse, scattered organization at CAE, and we primarily focus on civil aviation, defense and security training, and healthcare training. So we're a very training-centric organization. So that being said, it kind of leads into, I guess, your question a little bit. In terms of MSP at CAE, we've had an MSP for around 5 years. But my experience maybe goes back a bit of time prior to that, and not to disclose my length of time in supply chain, but it's been quite significant. My previous life, I was in an organization where it was multiple divisions, and every division had a different experience with MSP. I was from a division that didn't have MSP, but I dealt with divisions that had full MSP, home-made MSP, combined with VMS, which is vendor managed systems. So I guess I've had probably 10 years of experience in every situation of being with an MSP or not with an MSP. So I guess that's the first part of the question. And, I guess for me, it was always, before I got into service procurement, it was always a bit of a struggle for me. It was not clear exactly how things work. So I think I don't know the audience, but based on your knowledge of contingent workforce and services, really helps you understand the landscape in this area. And I primarily focused on operations prior to getting into more services. So I really had no understanding, and it took some time to get used to acronyms to the different situations and services. So, I think it's now I've got a very good understanding of MSP.
Perfect. When we look at the overall goals, so as a procurement leader, what were some of the opportunities that you saw in a stronger visibility and strong contingent workforce management? And what were some of the objectives that you wanted to achieve?
As a procurement leader, there's always a challenge, right? As procurement leaders, in terms of engaging the business, your internal user, your internal business. A lot of activity was happening outside of the program. Why is activity happening outside of the program? We're driving compliance. We're trying to drive reduction in risk. We're looking for visibility all the time on our spend. So a lot of those elements for me were critical, and there's also a mindset shift as well internally. A lot of internal stakeholders or users felt that the MSP was just an additional cost on doing business. And why should I use an MSP when I can go out and hire a contingent worker directly myself? I'm saving that fee, right? So there's a lot of educating of users and bringing in the procurement mindset of supplier rationalization and leveraging spend volume to get better rates in the marketplace. So a lot of education and continuous change management required, I feel when it comes to this space. So knowing it is very important to selling it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So as a goal, I had a manual MSP process at CAE. So I wanted to automate. One of our strategic initiatives globally was automation and globalization. How can we automate what we do, and how can we globalize what we do? So I guess they were two key driving factors for me when I joined CAE, was how do I take a manual process that's not really complied with 100%? How do I automate to ensure compliance, and globalize it? How do I scale up? How do I expand into other regions of the world? And then obviously I mentioned the standardization and the compliance was key. So I guess it was a few key factors there.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you are mentioning as well, when you mentioned some of the education that were needed to be done, as well as some of the other, let's call it rogue spend or lack of adoption. When we look at it with what you just mentioned with the manual process versus automation, that user experience in the end becomes important to think about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to enhance the user experience to drive adoption. If it's a painful process, in my experience, you won't get people using it, right? So yeah.
So talking about services procurement, you had staff augmentation in scope before, and in your roadmap, you're moving to have all of staff augmentation and all of services procurement managed and getting full visibility. Tell us a little bit more about the why behind the decision.
So yeah, I think COVID definitely exacerbated the challenges we faced in procurement, for better or for worse, right? We experienced a lot of having to cancel a lot of contingent workers, very short notice as COVID hit us, and especially in the aerospace industry, we were more impacted than most industries. So as we scrambled to try to pull reports and find out who was in the process, who was not in the process, we kind of realized the weaknesses with the current process we had. But we also said, well, let's turn this into an opportunity. How do we drive automation. What else can we bring into a robust, structured program that could help us drive saving, control costs? So we looked at statement of work. We have a huge spend under statement of work. We felt like, are we managing our statement of work properly? The answer was no. We were overrunning on our budgets for most our statement of work activity. We realized a lot of contingent workforce was hidden in statement of work as consultants or other categories. So we felt like there was an opportunity there. We really felt there was pain points, right? Even within procurement on managing statement of work with hiring managers, so we felt like a lot of things led back to statement of work, and how could we bring this into an MSP to manage it better, to manage the deliverables on statement of work, and to automate the payment and the payable portion as well. So a bit of an automation, but also a better management of our costs through the process. So I guess very high level, that was our thinking on expanding the MSP.
I think your allusion, relating back to a year ago, that the world has changed drastically as well. Lots of organizations, what you're mentioning, lots of organizations have realized that services, there was a pause a little bit put on the world. And when you look at your services, how much of that statement of work has been consumed already? Where are you at? How much of the burn-in do you have? And that visibility at the worker level. Quite often we know the statement of work, what's the total value, but then where are you at on that value, and how can you manage that to that level? So it's a good point you're bringing up.
And just visibility, right? On statistics and reporting, we had no visibility on where we were with different projects, how much we'd spent, were we under cost, over cost, it was. So I think the power of an MSP and automation gives you that information, right? Which is critical, right? So just having data is key. Yeah.
Perfect. So, speaking to identifying some of the stakeholders. So when you look at the different stakeholders at CAE, is that something that you did within the procurement group solely, or what are the different stakeholders that you have identified in the decision-making process, and what role were those stakeholders playing in your journey?
Yeah, wow, it's a big question, and there's a lot to unpack. So I'd say, starting in strategic sourcing that I'm responsible for, I think we were the key stakeholder to start. We seen like a no PO, supplier approval, work getting done outside of our control. So we would get basically an invoice, and we would be asked to create a PO and pay. So part of my joining CAE was to change that behavior, which we've done manually with team members, et cetera, et cetera. So we started to do that change. So now we want to say, okay, so now that we have changed the behavior somewhat, how do we supplement this behavior with a strong process, and automate, as I mentioned earlier. So we started within ourselves, highlighting the issues, and then we took the opportunity of COVID, and the company had a cry for help to say, how can we generate more revenue? How can we control our costs better? So we leveraged that opportunity with our C-suite representatives, like the CFO, our legal head of legal counsel for compliance, and my executive VP boss as well in operations, and the HR executive VP. So we communicated at that level the issues we were seeing and the opportunity we presented with enhancing our contingent workforce solution, but also adding statement of work, globalizing, which was very important to them, and capturing all of our spend under this approach. So they were engaged, but then you have to go bottom up as well, right? So Then you had to go speak to the hiring managers on contingent workforce and say, what are your pain points? And we realized there was lots of pain points. There was lots of inconsistency. There was lots of process breakdown. So we felt, okay, automating contingent workforce was really going to enhance the experience for the hiring manager. To speak of statement of work, we haven't gone there yet. So going there is another big adventure. I feel like because we have contingent workforce, MSP in place, the company is aware of what that journey looks like a little bit. So it's going to ease our journey into statement of work, but we are going to have huge change management for sure. I can't sugarcoat that. We are going to have change management, and working with an MSP that has strong change management is going to be key for me, right? It's a make it or break it. It's going to be a lot of working with our internal customers, convincing them that this is a strong, legitimate strategy that's going to benefit them. So it's always about how it benefits the internal user, right? At the end of the day. So
yeah. And that's continuous reinforcement at the same time, right? And
absolutely
being able to continuously reinforce the communication. Where's the program at? What are the benefits that were brought in? You mentioned about the different stakeholders, both at the C-suite as well as the users, and different being broad and wide and up and down as well. So I think it's a very strong advice for the people on the line right now. You mentioned about finance, you mentioned about IT, you mentioned about the users. What are the different messages or the different benefits or risks that you've had to communicate to the stakeholders to get their buy-in?
I think you have to tailor your communication to the different people, right? So we basically identified the pain points from a strategic sourcing standpoint of, leakage, of activity outside of scope, which was very concerning to our CFO, very concerning to our VP of operations. We highlighted, for contingent workforce, we highlighted to our VP of HR, the risks associated with keeping contingent workers beyond certain periods of time, and how you manage that type of worker. And, so I guess, JF, I kind of going around in circles a little bit, but it really depends on who you're talking to, right? So for the user, you have to show the benefit of automating and how it makes their life easier and how payment will be easier. And if it's statement of work, it'll be milestones that will be entered into the system, and they will just have to click approve when the client has delivered what they say they'll deliver, right? Versus them trying to micromanage every single statement of work that they have. So you tailor the communication to the audience. That's the best answer I can give you.
Great advice. Great advice. When we look at barriers to success, during your journey, I'm sure it was not always flowers along the journey. There were some I guess, challenges that you faced. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those were and how you addressed those challenges?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the first thing I would say is, because we had an MSP in place for 5 years, that really helped. At my previous company, there was no MSP, so it was a much harder sell, and it's a different approach. So I just want to make sure that's kind of clear, because I'm going to make some assumptions based on an MSP being in place. So it helped. It helped because we were used to a supplier-funded model. We're used to putting some major suppliers through an MSP. The company had some familiarity, not 100% compliant, but we had majority of our users going through that. So that helped. If I didn't have that, I would think I would be listing maybe more challenges, because you have to convince people of an MSP. But internally, I think IT, you definitely need to understand your IT roadmap, your IT vision. Because when it comes to automation and linking a vendor managed system, a VMS, to our IT infrastructure and architecture, you need to understand that very clearly. There are costs associated with that. There is maintenance of these type of systems. So make sure that you're aligned with that vision. I think that was a key one. You know, it's easy to just assume that there, you know, that'll be just, oh, that'll be an easy cost. Don't worry about that. And you focus more on the commercial business elements of savings, of automation, but really understand how you're aligned internally with your IT department would be one major takeaway I would have.
Perfect.
And, you know, yeah, I guess I answered in terms of overcoming that is really just engage early with all the key stakeholders, you know, in preparing your business case internally.
Yeah, and being proactive about that as well, I think is what I heard through what you mentioned is engaging early, being proactive, and asking them questions. From a technology standpoint, what's the role that the technology plays in your staff augmentation and services procurement?
Yeah, so you know, I guess today I have an MSP and it's quite manual. The process is very much human driven. Our MSP is managed outside of our system, so to speak, so very disjointed. You know, we have multiple tools that we use, so that doesn't help the user experience. So I think you have to look at the end-to-end process and how do you create a seamless process for the user. So if it's contingent workforce, how does that user raise a requisition for headcount, and then it links seamlessly through the different systems. So you have the MSP interfacing with the VMS, which is the vendor managed system in the background, and payment and all of that happens automatically through the different systems, and your MSP can manage all of that connectivity with you. So, you know, I think that's important. You know, the end-to-end automation, spend discovery. You know, you want to get all your spend into a system and then start understanding your spend. You know, and that will drive savings. It'll drive good decisions, and the governance, right? You know, you want to centralize all of this activity, and you want to drive the best behavior, and then strategic sourcing can become strategic sourcing, and we can start making the right sourcing decisions globally for the organization.
Yeah, and it's interesting that also what you're mentioning about the technology, right? And there was a system in place through your manual process that you described.
Yeah.
But I think reflecting back on the selection of which system that you're going to have is a critical decision as well. And how does that line up, not just for current needs, but is that the right foundation for you to build on as well? Can you actually expand on what you're building on that foundation?
Well, that's it. And I think understanding what a VMS does is very important, right? The system, you know, whatever system it is, but just understanding the advantages of having a VMS system, whichever one it is, because it really does help you track statement of work, unlike any other system, right? We have Oracle, we have Ariba, a VMS tracks statement of work to the milestone, you know, payment. So it depends what your organization is looking for. And also in our MSP today, the VMS is in the background, so I don't have access to that. So, you know, I wanted more access to that system, so I could have that visibility. So that's also very important to think about.
And that's so key, right? Visibility is having that level of transparency into your spend and to the worker level and milestones.
Exactly.
So looking ahead, how do you expect your statement of work program to mature? And what we were just talking about foundation. So what are the foundations that you're laying out to be able to build on that maturity and for the future?
Yeah, so specifically around statement of work, because it's going to be new, we're going to go slow. It's step by step, right? We need, as I said earlier, the change management is going to be key. So I see us starting with North America, you know, and a majority of our spend is in is centralized out of Montreal, because that's where our headquarters are. So we are going to actually tackle the bulk of our spend, but start there, you know, and then gradually roll it out, right? And it's going to be case by case, right? We're going to go supplier by supplier, you know, top down, the 80-20 rule, but then we can start looking at commodity by commodity, or category by category, or location by location, right? So it really depends on your organization. We have very weak procurement resources in certain locations, so maybe that could be accelerated, you know, the statement of work management there, because they need that support. The other element about statement of work management is we're going with like a lower level approach to begin with, which is very basic statement of work management. Like, it's basically resource tracking and payment release. You can go full blown. Your MSP can manage everything about a statement of work if you want. So I think also taking small steps in terms of what is going to be done to begin with, to see how it works, where you do it, and then you start to grow. You start to expand, and then you can expand your statement of work depending on your needs. So I like the flexibility of having a model where I can go with very few tasks or a lot of tasks, you know, in terms of statement of work management.
And what you do, for those on the line that are maybe familiar with the SIA terminology, I think what you described is probably aligned with services procurement level 1, level 2, or level 3 management from the SIA terminology. So, you've addressed a good point about the 80-20 rule. So I think what I heard is, do you start with your largest spend, or do you start with your tail? And that's a big question a lot of organizations are asking themselves, right? And there's value in being able to start with your larger spend, because then you can actually create more value for those suppliers and then start to address the tail.
Exactly.
So I know that we're almost out of time, and there's going to be some questions. What are some of the advice you would provide to some of the people on the line? If you had like a few advice to provide them, I know we're seeing a few here, but if you could comment on your advice for the audience.
Yeah, so, you know, absolutely, as a procurement person, analyze your spend. Really understand if you feel there's an opportunity there. And when I say spend, what are you not seeing? You know, do you have access to your spend? Can you break it down by what's going through? If you have an MSP, what's going through your MSP? If you haven't got an MSP for a statement of work like me right now, understand your statement of work spend. Like, what categories? Is it finance? Is it HR? Is it engineering? Is it IT? Where's the bulk of that spend? Start to understand, you know, how much you know, spend is going through those different commodities. It'll really help you start this discussion, you know, and then you can reach out to any MSP to help you understand if there's an opportunity there, you know. I mentioned IT alignment. It was a lesson that I learned during this journey. Make sure you understand what the IT roadmap is internally, because automation to a commercial person like me is very different to an IT folk. So make sure that they understand what you're trying to do or what you want to do, and if it's aligned with their philosophy. Don't bite off more than you can chew, you know, step by step. That's, I guess, an obvious one, a bit like our discussion, JF, 80-20 principle. Start close to where you are, expand outward globally, step by step, and have a really strong change management person with you. I don't think it's there, but that would be my tip number 4. We have a change management team at CAE, so we have them engaged from the very beginning of our process, because introducing something new to any organization is a huge change, and you need adoption, right? So it's very important that you partner with someone that is very strong in change management, and you have some change management people internally within your organization.
And great advice. And when you mentioned about not biting off more than you can chew, so obviously CAE is global. You're in multiple countries. So starting with North America, where you've got most of your spend, and then expanding to whether it's Europe, Asia. Sound advice there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you go, my last piece of advice would be, you don't know what you'll discover as you go, as you grow, as you expand. So there may be more opportunities that you can actually take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for your insight today. We did hit the end clock. Sorry to cut you off. I know that we could have stayed longer, but I do appreciate you sharing today. Attendees, there is an evaluation link in the chat, so click on that. Tell them how they scored. And we have 2 more set of sessions today, and then we're closing out with a keynote later on this afternoon, and then the prize gives away. So folks, stay around. We got a lot more to go through today, but thank you both, Bernard and JF, for sharing your insight today and carving out some time to speak with us. We truly appreciate it.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
All right, have
Thank
a
you.
great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.